Okay, so Mike, question for you here. The New York Times reported today on just how involved certain GOP members were in the effort to overturn the 2020 election. Now, all of them are House Freedom Caucus members. I mean, individuals like Jim Jordan, Paul Gosar, Lauren Boebert, Mo Brooks, Mike Lee, and the rest of the freaking crazies. Now, all of this shows a broad effort by a wide swath of the GOP to end democracy. That's how I see it. My first question to you is, how is it possible that there are so far zero consequences for engaging in this type of behavior? I mean, is it not illegal to overturn democracy? And if not, what safeguards can be added to ensure that elected officials do not engage in a coup moving forward?
Hey, well, first of all, let me say it's great to be back with you, Michael, and really appreciate coming on and having this conversation, because I think it's not only timely, but it's incredibly important on a number of levels. So one, consequences. What the broader public has learned, but more specifically, the individuals you cite inside and outside of the administration, and certainly within the Republican Party, is there are no consequences for bad behavior. They did not realize the judgment of the people or the legal system, unlike some that we know who got caught and paid a price. These individuals have not. And so until one of them goes down in a spectacular way, there is no downside to engaging in what we've seen. So the text messages that are coming out now reveal very clearly something that you and I talked about the last time we were together. And certainly that you've known and I've known separately for a long time, that there was intimate involvement by these individuals who were coaxing and coaching this process along, whether it was from the Fox News ecosystem or if it was out of the halls of the Republican caucus. They were all sort of shaping the events that led to January 6th. And so now, the question becomes, and this falls back on the Justice Department as well as the January 6th Commission, what will be done for it because of it? What price will they pay? I don't get the idea, quite honestly, Michael, why everyone's so damned afraid to haul Donald Trump's ass in front of the January 6th committee, or to have Merrick Garland, put the paper on him, as Letitia James is doing in New York City, and make him at least account publicly for his behavior. And until that happens, you're going to see more of this stuff gotten away with.
Yeah, and part of the Trump playbook, and again, I take responsibility for a bulk of it because I was the creator of it. What we did is we created a message, and then that message was sent by emails, by texts, etc., to all of the various different members. Whether if it was part of the campaign, it would go to basically all the executives as part of the campaign. And he did the same thing when it came to government. So everybody stays on message. Let's not forget for a second that Republicans kept calling it legitimate political discourse. Right. That the entire January 6th insurrection, right, the entire coup against our government was legitimate political discourse, when anybody with half a brain knows that that's not what it was. And what are we seeing now? We're seeing the Justice Department, try to flex their muscles and say, we're doing what we are supposed to do, the January 6th committee included. And they say, we've already now prosecuted several hundred people who were involved in the insurrection. The part that offends me, and I think it should offend all Americans, is it's the Joe and Jane Doe that are being prosecuted. These assholes from the Oath Keepers, right, who are being charged with sedition under, 18 USC, what the heck is the number over here? I know I wrote it down somewhere. 18 USC 2834. Right? The whole issue of sedition. Two or more persons in any state or territory, in any place, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, if they conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, etc. And that's exactly what they're charging them with. They're not charging them with treason. They're not even charging them with the insurrection. It's all under sedition, conspiracy to commit sedition. What's interesting is the number one seditionist himself, the commander of sedition. Right. What you're right. Why has Merrick Garland not now already indicted him and hauled his ass, to court for the same act that they did to all of these other people that he sent there? And interestingly enough, because I was talking about all of these emails and so on, and these text messages from Mark Meadows, it all proves exactly what you and I have known for a long time. It's proving what you and I have spoken about in the past on this show. It's proof positive.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right about how this lays itself out and how people not only perceive it, but understand it based on the facts, based on what we witnessed as eyewitnesses to history at that time, what we are now learning from the revelations that have come from emails and text messages, et cetera. But here's the rub, and I do it as a lawyer. I know you do as a lawyer as well, understand and appreciate.
Disbarred lawyer.
True, but a lawyer, at least the education, right? You
I'll
get
take
where
that.
I'm going with this.
I do.
But that there is, from a prosecutor standpoint, an idea of making sure I can back up the charges I want to bring, making sure that if I'm going to go after the number one seditionist in the country, Donald Trump, that I've got a case that will not get thrown out by a judge, or a case that will not lead to a conviction by a jury of his peers. And so particularly given that the jury pool that likely will be chosen, we'll have a mix of people with views on Donald Trump. They want to make sure that they lay that case out correctly, that the case it makes itself, if you will. Having said that, though, I think that there's been enough that has been publicly revealed. We haven't seen the stuff that the January 6th Commission has been able to pull together. The over 900, interviews that they've done, or 600 interviews that they've done. Thousands and thousands of pages of paper that have been amassed in this thing, that the Justice Department does not already have in its hands the evidence of the nature of a crime that, as you've described. And so I think that brings enormous pressure on Merrick Garland. I think it's enormous pressure on the January 6th Commission to, when they start their public hearings, to come with the goods, to deliver those receipts, because we all know that after November 4th, if Republicans take the House, this all goes away. The January 6th Commission becomes a Hunter Biden hunting party, and becomes the stage for impeachment proceedings against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for God knows what, maybe just getting up in the morning. So the realities are stark, and they're very clear what lies ahead, which means, again, from Merrick Garland's position, knowing what the end game potentially looks like in a change of power in November, to if I'm going to do something, I'm going to make it stick, and I'm going to make it stick hard. And so, yeah, we're frustrated with not seeing a lot of that. I'd like to see at least some indication that they get the seriousness of this. Sometimes I just don't understand if they really do, but I have to assume that they do. And we'll have to wait and see how they ultimately play that card.
Yeah, well, you know the problem with assuming on anything.
I
right?
do. That I do.
Exactly. But Mike, I'm going to have to disagree with you on one aspect here.
Sure.
Right. When it comes to prosecutors, and I believe this is the exact same mistake that the New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg is making. Prosecutor's job is not to convict. It's to prosecute a case. It's to look at the evidence and determine whether or not a crime has been committed. Well, as I said, 18, USC, and let me go back to my note here, 2834. There is no doubt that there is ample evidence to demonstrate a case of conspiracy to commit sedition. And I'm going to just now reference a CNN article that is by Jamie Gangel, where they talk about the January 6th committee has obtained 2,319 text messages. All right. And in it, it's, of course, between Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and a whole slew of individuals, many of whom that I had mentioned at the beginning of this program. And what the article turns around and says is that these texts offer the most revealing picture to date of how Trump's inner circle, supporters, and Republican lawmakers worked behind the scenes to try to overturn the election results, and then reacted to violence, reacted to the violence that effort unleashed at the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. All right. Now, that's just the ones that Mark Meadows turned over. I'm very curious about the other 8,000 or so text messages that he has not turned over. But nevertheless, the information that's been provided, whether it was text messages from Don Jr., from Ivanka, from even Reince Priebus, Rancid Penis, and all of these assholes, even those go ahead and they show what was going on there, what the intent was. And my feeling is that Mark Meadows should be number one on the list immediately for an indictment. He's playing with people, whether it was with burner phones, like has been discussed before the January 6th committee, or these arrogant assholes were using their own personal or government phones within which to do it. This is, as you stated, this is not a joke. This is our democracy in peril. And I totally agree with you 100% that if in fact the House turns, which it's expected to do that, and historically this is what has happened, the very first act by this new House, whether it's going to be Jim Jordan or it's going to be Mark Meadows as Speaker, the very first act is going to be articles of impeachment against Joe Biden. Now, you asked a great question, too. Based upon what? They will cook it up with Afghanistan. They will cook it up with Ukraine. They will, who the heck knows? It doesn't matter. They will file articles of impeachment, and because they have the majority, those articles of impeachment will pass. Whether or not, like what happened with Trump, that he's convicted at the Senate level, that nobody knows. Who knows? But rest assured, impeachment will happen day one, right after the swearing in of all of these new Republican members. And that's not only is it a sad commentary for us, it's destructive to our democracy in going forward.
No, I agree with all of that, and I believe that is the analysis that the American people need to come to grips with, to be honest. Look, we cannot absolve ourselves in all of this as well. We're not just passive participants or just, hey, tune in, tune out viewers of what's happening to our democracy. This will have a direct effect, not just on our present, but certainly on our future. How we govern ourselves, who are those that we choose to lead in that governing. All of that matters. And I think the carefulness with which we expect our legal institutions like the DOJ to take and the approach that they have to take, that's all valid. But at the same time, we also have to recognize, as you said, there is the evidence. And my concern ultimately is, Michael, that because this involves a former president, because it involves a former chief of staff and other high government officials, because of that patina of, of elevated status in our political life and culture, that at the end of the day, they cannot or should not be touched. We do not want to disrupt the system. We don't want to set a bad precedent. Well, for me, that's all bullshit. I mean, at the end of the day, you commit a crime, I got evidence to show you're out there telling people to show up and riot. Yeah, you've got to be held accountable for that, regardless of your position or your station in life, because you and I know damn well that if either one of us sat up and were involved in organizing the overthrow of the federal government, this wouldn't even be a question mark. It wouldn't even be a question mark if you had the kind of evidence against Donald Trump that they would, apply to us.
Well, I paid $130,000 to a porn star who pulled the president's mushroom pecker, and I went to prison. Could you imagine what these assholes should get, including the Mark Meadows of the world, right? Who these text messages clearly demonstrate, and I don't care if you are an up-the-ass Trump supporter where you can see his tonsils. It doesn't matter to me.
Matter.
The bottom line is, look at the text messages and read them yourself. And if you can't read, I'm more than happy to try to find someone to read them, to you. But they clearly demonstrate how Mark Meadows played a key role in the attempts to stop Biden's certification on January 6th. That, my friend, is the classic definition of sedition. All right, end of story. So at the bare minimum, Mark Meadows should already be indicted. And the fact that he's able to get away with it, you know what that does? That empowers the lunatics, the fucking crazies, like Ted Cruz, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like Matt Gaetz, like Mo Brooks, like that fucking jerk off Paul Gosar, right? I mean, what it does is it empowers them to continue to act in a illegal and an unconstitutional manner, plain and simple.
It does.
I don't understand why you and I can have this conversation, but the country's not having this conversation.
Well, and that speaks to what the country has decided it will concern itself with. Look, I get it. Inflation is 8%. Gas prices are high. There are a lot of external and internal reasons for that. And it doesn't mean that they're less important concerns to have. But there is a broader and I think more important concern, and that is the state of our criminal justice system, our judicial system, and the rule of law alongside of the democratic ideals that define the nation. When we like to say and preach, Michael, that no one is above the law, and then we start creating carve-outs, right? And not direct carve-outs. But just so carve-outs by, omission, or carve-outs by, just sort of soft peddling behavior, and carve-outs by position. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I'm so sick and tired of it. Well, no one's against, Donald Trump is not above the law. But then why do we act as if he is?
Right. I call bullshit on that too.
Yeah. And so that's the reality that we find ourselves in. And more Americans are subscribing to that point of view because they want, to blame someone for paying $5 for a gallon of gas. And I'm like, okay, that's the least of our concerns, because if you can't go vote, if you can just get hauled off into jail because you said the wrong thing, which is the concern raised by right now with what's going on with Twitter and all these other social media pockets, what do you care? Why are you concerned about the price of gas if your fundamental rights are stripped away, and if your citizenship is called into question, if all of these other things, we've got people out here burning books, for God's sakes, because they don't like what's in the book, right? So all of this talk about, well, free speech by these hard-ass Republicans is bullshit, because at the end of the day, they're burning books that I thought would fall under that banner of free speech. And so it boils down to, if you don't think they're going to come for you at some point, they will. You are a living lesson in that. And the reality of it is, no matter how close you think you may be, to being protected, you're still too close to the sun.
That's the whole story. It's the whole story of Icarus, yes, right? It's the whole story of Icarus. And it's actually why I created Mea Culpa in the first place. Mea Culpa is not just a podcast. And I said this on the last one as well. Mea Culpa, I'm trying to create it as a movement not that's anti-Trump, right, not that anti-Republican. It's a movement for democracy, because I do truly see, I've been close to power. I've been there by the sun, and my wings melted, and I fell flat on my face right down to earth, because right, I hate to say it, Donald was behind it, along with Bill Barr and others. But, I love how people start screaming, oh my God, it's $4.50, $5 a gallon of gas, yet you're willing to pay $2.50 for 16.9 ounces of a bottle of water, right? You need 10 of those in order to make 1 gallon. So you're basically paying $25 for a gallon of water, but you're screaming and kicking, and you're willing to throw democracy right into the fucking dumpster, right? Because of $5. Now, mind you, I'm a realist too. I fill up my car and it costs me a lot of money and I hate it. But I actually would hate living in an autocracy with Donald Trump as the Führer, right? Where, like with Kim Jong-un, you got to walk outside when he's going down the street in the middle of sub-zero temperature, simply because it appeals to his ego. And it's a real problem, and people don't see it. I hate to say it's because they're stupid or they're blind. It's one or the other.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of blindness and a little bit of ignorance, deliberate ignorance. We've seen that narrative play itself out in the evangelical community that have so, wholeheartedly, and I think in many ways, falsely embraced this sort of Trumpist behavior that they would not condone in others, and did not condone in others for damn near 40 years. And yet that hypocrisy is there. And so there is this combination of ignorance and just sort of a lack of honesty that forms the hypocrisy around what we're seeing. And so it is conversations like this to call it out. It is, and I said this to you the first time we ever chatted, and it's certainly something I said during the course of your trials and tribulations that were very, very public, that regardless of what you think of, Michael Cohen and what he did or did not do, what he may have done or may not have done, what he said or what he didn't say, he is now the perfect person to pull back the blinders, open up the doors, strip down the curtains and lay bare the room so you can see exactly what's going on inside. So regardless of how we got here or who the messenger is, accept the moment, walk into the room with clear eyes and understanding exactly what is being shown to you or what's being told to you. Because at this point, I remember saying this on MSNBC, at this point, there's no upside for Michael to lie about any of this because it's all verifiable.
No. And I provided all of those documentary evidence in order to justify it. But I want to move on, and I want to ask you this, because we're talking about fucking liars here. So let me bring up 2 of them. The Washington Post today released a series of texts from Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jason Miller that show the origin of the absurd and ugly lie that it was Antifa supporters who were behind the January 6th attack. Now, the timing shows how quickly the lie was constructed, and then just as quickly how it spread via Fox News and right-wing media. It's amazing here, because in discussing the larger motive of spreading this lie, the Post wrote, and I'm going to quote now, "All this points to something else as well. The extraordinary cynicism at the core of much right-wing warmongering about the left." Now, right. Green belongs to a faction of right-wing Republicans who not only traffic in intimidation of political violence and thuggery, they often reverse justify it with wildly hysterical claims about the left's alleged violence and thuggery, whose detachment from any sense of obligation to empirical reality is absolute. If you do me the favor, discuss with me what you believe the Post is saying here and how it figures on the right exploiting these baseless rumors of marauding Antifa terrorists as a kind of dog whistle for white America, and how that is used as kind of a whataboutism to excuse what happened on January 6th.
Yeah, I think the Post very accurately lays that out, and you know, to break it down into street terms, basically what Marjorie Taylor Greene and Miller and others inside and outside the White House were doing at that time, as they had been doing or attempting to do, running out of the RNC operations and other organs of the party, the Congressional Committee, Senatorial Committee, et cetera, is the broader umbrella of own the libs. So when you're breaking down what that means and how that looks, what it says to me at least is let's create the kind of deflection points that we need around our own behavior, projected back onto other organs and institutions and individuals in a way that you know, sort of shifts the narrative away from us and onto them. So you're looking at the screen, seeing all of these white nationalists storming the Capitol. What these assholes want you to walk away with in looking at that was that they were actually supporters of Antifa, meaning largely Black and white individuals who were far left antagonists who were stirring this pot. So don't look at these folks as the white Trump supporters that they were, but rather look at them as white and Black people who put on Trump paraphernalia to storm the castle, if you will. So here's the rub. You can take every Antifa in the country and they wouldn't come close to the number of people who were on that platform that day storming the Hill. Meaning that organization, which has already been discredited as an institutional organization that has been projected as terrorists or somehow anti-U.S. government. Trump's own Justice Department took care of that and said, I'm sorry, that ain't there. A, it's not enough people, and B, that's not the kind of behavior they're engaged in. But this is a form of projection. It is a form of trying to own the libs in a way that he says, it's not us, it's them. And it gets into this, if you don't believe that, to your other point about the whataboutism, well, if you don't believe, but what about them? Even if it is us, you're not critical of, and I just saw this tweet recently this week on a related subject, someone saying, well, everybody's not paying attention to all those, all the damage that Antifa caused during the George Floyd riots. I'm like, A, they didn't storm the U.S. Capitol. B, yeah, they burned a Target or two that was in their own neighborhood. C,
still improper. But why is one being used to justify or discredit the other? That's the problem. You know what that is, Michael? That's what illusionists do,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
You see this? Nothing in my hand, right?
Right.
right? Nothing there. Don't look over here to the right. Look over there to the left. That's what it is.
And that's the deflection. That is the deflection and the projection that you want to see here. So yeah, it didn't surprise me when I read this story. It didn't surprise me, and it wouldn't have at the time if it was revealed real time back in December and January, of what the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and others were doing to set this thing in motion, to find the boogeymen and women and to project onto them the bad acts that were about to take place. And here we are. All of that's now being revealed because we have the text messages back and forth. You've got, the setup, and then the plaintiff plea by folks like Sean Hannity telling them, and Laura Ingraham telling them to stop after they then go on air and continue to tell that same story. Or
Don Jr. or Ivanka or just about everybody, Rancid Penis, saying all of them. But Mike, I said this also on MSNBC at one point. You know how I know that it wasn't Antifa that was storming the Capitol?
How's that?
Because if it were people of color, if they were black and brown, there would have been a whole lot of dead bodies sitting there on the floor in front of the Capitol. That's really what I believe, and that's really sad.
It is.
I know I believe it in my heart, and I wish to God that I didn't, and I wish that I didn't think it was true. But you rest assured that if it were black people or brown people or people of color that were storming the Capitol that day, rest assured that there would have been many more bullets fired than the one that prevented that woman from going in.
Oh yeah, they wouldn't even have made it up the steps. They would have been fired upon the moment they started to encroach upon the barricades that were initially set up. They would have been fired upon as they tried to ascend the step. I mean,
how sad is that?
I don't have to. You and I don't have to make that up. We have history to show that. I mean, we just know the way a police action reacts to people of color engaging in disruptive, violent behavior, how that turns out, because we've seen how it turns out when they don't engage in disruptive, violent behavior.
Yeah.
So, the idea that, this somehow would have been the same narrative, that they would have been allowed to encroach the building and to and to break the glass and to sit at the rostrum and to crap on the halls of the Congress just would not have happened. It just wouldn't have happened. So there is this ongoing reality of accountability in all of this that still remains, in my view, an undercurrent that is a real live current that needs to be addressed in so many different ways. And it goes back to how we started the conversation. When you're sitting back and you're watching these people do what they've done in the way that they've done it, with full frontal evidence of their violation of law and their oaths of office, et cetera, and not pay a price for that, it really sends the message going forward that I can now engage in that behavior with impunity. But here's the rub. Don't try that shit if you're black or brown.
Right.
Your ass gonna have a whole different
outcome. Yeah, that is 100% true.
It's gonna be a whole different outcome.
It sure is, but I don't understand this concept. It's why I turned around at the House Oversight Committee, and the first words out of my mouth, Donald Trump is a racist. And it's true. And what he's doing is he's playing on white privilege and white fear of people of color, of black males, and so on. I have to be honest, Mike. If I saw you walking down the street, I wouldn't fear you at all. I know I can kick your ass up and down the street, so I'm not really sure why.
Right.
I'm not really sure. Webster. I got him too. Don't worry about it. I got Webster. I got Kevin Hart. No problem. I'll take his ass out too.
No problem.
Yeah, no problem at all. But let me move forward before we really digress into a foolish conversation here.
Exactly.
So, despite everything that we know about the GOP's efforts to end democracy, they're still likely going to win majorities in both the House and the Senate this November. So if you would, share some predictions with me on what the next 2 years will look like with someone like Kevin McCarthy as the House Speaker and Jim Jordan running the judiciary. I mean, that really scares the living shit out of me. Tell me, how much deeper down the authoritarian rabbit hole do you think that we're going to ultimately fall?
Well, I think that's the ultimate question for people. I mean, I think the stakes are very high here. It will be a hellscape in many respects because this will be the setup of the return of the revenge, if you will, where they will begin to, in their efforts to placate Trump, put in motion, as we've already discussed, impeachment inquiries, Hunter Biden inquiries, all kinds of investigation of former of current White House officials and positions that the White House has taken, like you mentioned, in Afghanistan and efforts there. So all of that's going to be front and center. There will be no governing going on. So if people think that there will be policy prescriptions put forward, forget that. If there should be an opening on the Supreme Court, that doesn't happen. Because Mitch McConnell's already told us that, well, he got one, he's not getting any more. And so I think people need to recognize, if you give power back to the party that created and fueled the insurrection and attempted to overthrow the government, what the hell do you think you're going to get? They're not going to come to you with pancakes and lollipops and say, here, this is what we want to serve the American people. What they're going to serve up is recrimination and anger and vengefulness. Remember, these are people that are hell-bent on one thing and one thing only: owning the libs. And however that's defined, supplementing that, animating that, is a desire to embrace authoritarianism in a way that we have never seen in this country. It is really old line European republicanism from the 1920s and the 1930s that led to the rise of some pretty god-awful assholes in world history. We are now watching the beginning origins of some of our own homemade asshole authoritarians out of states like Florida and Arizona. I mean, just if you go and just watch, I just commend to your audience to go online and watch the clip of the United States Senate candidates from the Republican Party running in the state of Pennsylvania, and the debate that they just had last night.
It. My God.
I mean, if you want to get a taste of what's ahead of you, look at what they're doing now. That behavior,
welcome to the
people,
shit show,
does not change. I cannot emphasize this enough. I don't know what the hell we have to say to you to get you to understand that these mofos are not changing their stripes for you. They've embraced Trumpism. They will kill each other to get the blessing of this giant asshole of a president. And the reality of it is, it means nothing to him other than what it makes him feel like in the moment. He owes them no allegiance. He owes them nothing. And yet here they are, willing to turn over the country, their legitimacy, their money, whatever, to this man. So I just think that when you're going to the polls and you're looking at, I get it. Yeah, inflation's 8%. But really? That just happened in a year? No.
I don't know. We're also under 4% of unemployment, the lowest in decades. But I'll tell you what bothers me.
Let me just clarify this point,
sure,
so people understand what we're talking about here. That 8% inflation didn't begin because Joe Biden spent $1.1 trillion on infrastructure. that 8% inflation didn't appear just because the Biden administration tried to check COVID with a response that accelerated the needle program and the vaccine program and the getting control of that. That 8% inflation started when Republicans spent $8 trillion over in the previous 4 years. How the hell you think you account for that spending when there was no way to pay for it? Of course, that's going to have an impact on the economy. So it's not. People need to be clarified. I can get it. You want to be in the moment and blame the guy who's standing in front of you. But as you rightly noted, Michael, yeah, inflation is 8%, but unemployment is 3.6. Inflation is 8%, but guess what? The economy is opened up again, and we are producing goods. I mean, we have such a surplus of job opportunities now. We're trying to find employees. Everybody wants to talk about what's happening at the border. You know why the border is a, quote, problem right now? Because Americans aren't taking the jobs that are out there on the street. And so those workers are just migrating through. And guess what? A lot of employers aren't shaking their head at that. They're like, okay, as long as you got the right papers, come. So we need to understand and contextualize what's going on. And it goes back to the point you were making before about we can't afford to be ignorant about what is really happening now. And
we also, Mike, can't be
political blinders.
Right. And what we can't be ignorant of are the people that are running, as you rightfully stated in yesterday's shit show in Pennsylvania. And
right.
One of the things that scares the living piss out of me is Jim Jordan potentially being the judiciary, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. This is a man in 2020. There's an article in Sports Illustrated, and everybody on this program knows how much I despise Jim Jordan. But I want to read a quote. And then I want to move on, but I want to read this quote. Ohio representative and former Ohio State University wrestling coach Jim Jordan aided and abetted in the university's cover-up of sexual abuse within the program, and that's coming from a former team captain who said that in front of the Ohio State legislators. All right? Jim Jordan called me crying, groveling, begging me to go against my brother, begging me, crying for a half hour, DeSabato said. That's the kind of cover-up that's going on here. And this guy, Adam DeSabato, captain of the team during the early 1990s, told members of the Ohio House Civil Justice Committee that Jordan and other officials ignored former Ohio State doctor Richard Strauss's sexual abuse of wrestlers from 1979 to 1997. And DeSabato said that Jordan and other team officials knew about the open shower facilities that facilitated sexual harassment and abuse of team wrestlers. All right. This is bullshit. And yet, this is a guy that's going to be the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Folks, If that doesn't scare the living shit out of you, it's like putting Jeffrey Dahmer in charge of the president's dinner. This is absolutely insane. I don't know what people are thinking anymore. And they think this fucking guy is funny because he shows up to the floor not wearing a jacket. He's only in a tie. He looks like he's ready to go pick corn. This isn't fucking funny. All right. And I know, we can make lots of jokes about it. And I'm sure Saturday Night Live does a better job at it than we do. But this isn't funny when the guy is going to be the head. He's going to be the chair of the Senate Judiciary. One of the most powerful committees that's out there. And he's a Trump loyalist. This is just truly amazing. But let me just move on for a quick second here and ask you the following. So the release of the Kevin McCarthy tape with the minority leader discussing how he would pressure Trump to resign the presidency shows, for at least a very brief moment, the truth behind his blind allegiance that January 6th, right, for people like McCarthy and especially Mitch McConnell, was an opportunity to move the party away from Donald Trump. Now, that moment, though, lasted a mere 5 days before the retrenchment began. Now, as someone with a window into what these guys are thinking, What do you think happened behind the scenes that forced all of these guys to fall back in line? I mean, was it the reality of where the base voters' loyalties lay?
Yeah.
Or was it something more sinister? Like, do you think that Trump has dirt on these guys? And how does he keep them in line and continually carrying his dirty water?
Trump doesn't have dirt on anybody.
I agree.
He's never, and you would know better than I would. He's never struck me as the kind of guy who would roll like that. He would find other ways that cut a little bit closer to the bone than having a picture of you with some naked prostitute or whatever. I think what he's got on them is the fanboy allegiance that the base gives him, that these people will pour gasoline on themselves, run through a wall of fire, and expect not to be burned because of their allegiance to Donald Trump. And so when these elected officials see that, they're like, I don't need that coming after me. I don't need that in my primary. I don't need that in my general election. I don't need that hitting my fundraising. So it's all about self-preservation. And once he knows that, it's like any authoritarian, once they've assessed the weaknesses of the people around them, exploitation at home here. Come on, let's just do it every day. That's one. Here's the thing that I think people need to be clear on with Kevin McCarthy and why this is problematic internally as opposed to externally. Kevin McCarthy told the truth when he came out and refuted the New York Times article, when he said, I did not tell the president to resign. That's an absolute truth, because he doesn't have the balls to do that. He doesn't have the balls to confront the president that way. So he did not tell the president that. The lie was what he said to the caucus, that I'm going to tell the president to resign. And that back and forth with when Liz Cheney spoke up and said, well, let's be clear about what we're doing, but is it going to be this? Are we about, these are the things we're concerned about, yada, yada. I'm concerned about the same thing. He needs to account. I'm going to go to the president. In fact, I said this to him in our earlier conversation. And when I talk to him again, I'm going to make sure to say to him, that I think he should resign. That was the lie. And that's not lost from what I hear on a lot of caucus members who feel somehow that they've been put in an awkward position now, with a lot of reporters coming up to them saying, well, do you believe Kevin then, or do you believe him now? What's the deal? Did you got, and Kevin has a tendency, which is why he was not made speaker the last time, of putting his foot in his mouth in a way that is inextractable, and he just can't do it. And this did not go down well with a lot of members of the caucus, not just those who aren't Kevin McCarthy fans who would never vote for speaker in the first place, but it gave a lot of fodder to the Freedom Caucus that want to take him out, that would prefer, to your point, instead of seeing Jim Jones. He's
the Jim Jones of the Ohio wrestling team.
Right. instead of seeing
Jim Jordan.
Jim Jordan, not Jim Jordan. Instead of seeing Jim Jordan as chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, seeing him as Speaker of the House, or seeing him as Majority Leader. And there's a lot of momentum out there for that. So Kevin McCarthy is doing everything he has to do, in his view, to stay as close to Trump as he can, because he wants Trump final imprimatur on his political ambitions to become the speaker. I'm still skeptical that Trump delivers that, because Trump sees him for what he is. Now, Trump's calculation could be, you would know better. This is a punk I can use, particularly as I do my run-up for the 2024 presidential campaign. I don't think he runs, but he wants to be a player and be a kingmaker and shape that in some fashion. So owning the Speaker of the House the way he would own Kevin McCarthy would make a lot of sense to him, a lot of business sense to him, if you will. So he very well may, in the end, despite Kevin's inability to do anything that's politically smart or correct, give him that nod, because he's such a patsy and he's so malleable and he's so obsequious with the president that not only does he massage all the proper body parts for Donald Trump, he massages the most important body part, and that's his ego. He'll be the guy.
Yeah, though I have to be honest with you, Mike, I believe that if in fact that these individuals win their races, and I made a mistake, I was referring to Jim Jordan as the Senate judiciary. I'm talking about the House judiciary.
That's what I said, House, right?
But the House judiciary. But the interesting thing is, I don't think any of them stay loyal to him once they get into where they want right now. That's just my opinion.
They don't stay loyal to who?
To Donald. I think that they all realize at that point in time that he's no longer relevant, and he's losing his relevancy on a daily basis. Just unfortunately,
really, you think so?
Yeah, I do. I really believe that all of them end up doing.
We just watched the Senate candidate,
and that's because they haven't gotten the win yet. Once they get in, do you really think that Mehmet Oz gives two shits about Donald? Mehmet cares about Donald as much as Donald cares about Mehmet. He's using Donald like the rest of them in order to get in. Do you really think Ron DeSantis is going to placate Donald Trump once he wins? The answer is he's going to run for the presidency, whether or not Donald, chooses to join the race or not. It doesn't make a difference. But I want to jump onto a different topic that involves Donald. All right. I want to talk for a moment about Elon Musk and his now purchasing of Twitter.
Yeah.
Because he's made significant noise about removing censorship from the platform, which means to me that he's inclined to let people like Donald Trump return to the platform along with other extremist voices. Now, it's interesting because Donald has already said that he's not going back onto Twitter, which is bullshit, that he's going to only work on
Elon
his
Musk
Truth Social.
He'll
he doesn't even have to call him. Donald's going to go right back on once Elon takes over. Now, how critical is Twitter to public discussion, and how has it shaped our current discourse? And finally, what are your fears for a Musk-run Twitter?
Well, first off, there are a lot of ways to come at this. I want to start, and I think it's important to sort of put a little bit of fact here in perspective for everybody, so we know exactly what we're talking about and why we're talking about it the way I'm about to talk about it. We need to understand Twitter, like Facebook, like LinkedIn, like Instagram, like TikTok, are all publicly or privately held companies, meaning they may be publicly traded on the stock exchange, or they're privately held, such as Twitter will become when Elon Musk takes it over, right? The First Amendment does not apply here. The First Amendment only applies to government action. If the federal government or the state government owned Twitter, then the questions about free speech would be applicable across the board. So this notion that somehow Elon Musk is going to open up this free speech market space is utter bullshit, because it already exists. As a privately held or publicly held entity, I can control what Michael Cohen says on my platform. If I don't want Michael Cohen to speak on my platform, guess what? Michael Cohen is not speaking on my platform. If Michael Cohen says something I don't like on my platform, I have a choice to either say, okay, Michael, don't say that again, or you can say it, but within these parameters. I get to set those guardrails. So the reality of it is here that somehow people thinking that we're going to, have this very different kind of approach relative to the First Amendment rights of free speech. We're not, because it doesn't apply. To the extent that Elon Musk wants anybody to come on his platform, he can say it. He can invite all those rejects back on, including Donald Trump, who, like I agree with you, will jump at it in a heartbeat. to get back on that platform with millions and millions and millions of followers. So what does that mean? Twitter is a shit show in and of itself now. It will become the wild, wild west of shit shows in the future. The concern, and I think it will be one that a lot of Americans will be expressing within 6 months after the final, the ink is dried on that exchange, that this is now a forum for the projection and the advocacy of all types of illiberal, anti-democratic behavior and philosophies that are going to be corrupting to current and future generations. And we'll have to decide whether or not this platform survives on that basis. But he can do whatever he wants with it. The First Amendment doesn't apply. You can go on Twitter now, well, not now because the current ownership has some guardrails. But if he goes on and says, this is the wild, wild west, y'all come and do what you want to do, he can do that. And so you can say things. Now, you know, you may be holding yourself out for defamation charges if you say something that's defamatory or and the like. But hey, we'll have to wait and see. I think it's a scary proposition.
Yeah, well, me personally, I don't find it scary. And I have no issues with Elon Musk buying whatever the hell he wants to buy. And I know from my own experience, as far as I'm concerned, let Donald Trump come back on Twitter. Yeah. Let him continue to make an asshole out of himself. And ultimately, one by one, what have we seen? We've seen people tired. It's Trump fatigue of the bullshit, day in and day out. You know, I remember when Trump first joined onto Twitter and he started really, you know, getting millions and millions and millions of followers. And every time he'd put out, or I would put out a tweet on his behalf, every single time that he would do that, you would see 2 million, 3 million, you know, likes onto it and so on. While he was president of the United States, 16,000, 18,000, and just look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Donald does, but the numbers don't lie. His popularity, people started, okay, great. It's just more fodder for the press, the press that wants to be legitimate to turn and say, it's just another Trump lie. I'm all for Elon Musk doing whatever he wants. And if in fact I find the platform to be so troubling to me, I have my options too. I just jump off of the stupid platform and I move to someplace else. Maybe I'll move to Donald's Truth Network. You know, who the hell knows? If Devin the douche Nunes over there can finally figure out, could you imagine a $3 billion valuation on something that doesn't have a single follower onto it? But look, Mike, as we're we're getting to the end of the hour. I mean, time goes by really fast when you're having fun. I have one last question for you, and it goes back to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who I do believe is going to run regardless of whether Donald, is, making an announcement or not. You're going to see so many people on that line like existed the first time for him. You're going to see even more because everyone truly believes that if Donald can win, that they can win. So here's my question to you. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has created, and the quote is, an election police to root out supposed fraud and other crimes, right? It's like the wolf, monitoring the chicken house here. Right. Now, this feels seriously shady to me. It feels authoritarian and problematic on a number of levels. I'm curious what your feelings are about Ron DeSantis and what he's doing with this election police unit.
He's a better dressed up version than Donald Trump. He's a more articulate, charismatic version of Donald Trump, which makes him 10 times more dangerous. And that's been evidenced by the book burnings in Florida, the CRT crap, the anti-gay crap, all of it that he's been able to pass. The latest being, of course, the efforts by the legislature regarding Disney punishing corporations because they don't like the speech of those corporations. So corporations are persons for purposes of donations and money to their campaigns, but they're not persons with respect to any other rights under the state or federal constitutions. So I think we need to mark this time down. I am not yet convinced that DeSantis runs in this cycle for a number of reasons. Some are related to Trump, some are related to other opportunities, but that may be there. But that clearly can change as we get to the fall and see how that plays out, Michael. I think the country should take note. What you see happening in Florida is what Ron DeSantis wants to bring to the federal level. He wants to bring to the country. And you have to ask yourselves, are you okay with that? Because you already have states imitating his behavior and his policies. And I think that is something that should be a big red flag for all of us. Look, DeSantis didn't start out this way. And the fact of the matter is, like J.D. Vance and some others that we know, that this is the performative bullshit that they'd like to engage in, makes them more dangerous, more despicable, less trustworthy than someone who is, just the general, kind of P.T. Barnum Rube that Donald Trump is.
Yeah. Something I've said on this podcast many, many times. I've said it on CNN, on MSNBC, ABC, every outlet that I was asked questions on. There's a statement that Donald used to repeat over and over again, and it's a Putin / Stalin type quote. And he really attributed it mostly to Putin. And the quote was, "It doesn't matter who you vote for. All that matters is who's counting the vote." And that's, of course, why Putin gets 88%, 90% of the vote, which is always a fucking landslide, not seen by anything other than, of course, Kim Jong-un. And right. Donald thought that was a fascinating scenario. It's true. It doesn't matter who you vote for. All that matters is who's counting the vote. And that's what I see Ron DeSantis setting up here, willingly or unwittingly, right? This is what he is doing. And it
set
scares
up in Arizona.
me.
Yep. No, you are absolutely right. Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, exactly right. Florida. This is the setup. And some of us, like yourself and myself, have been screaming it since the last election, that all the changes that are flowing through these legislatures are designed for that very endpoint.
And that's what we really need to be nervous about. We need to ensure, and that's why I constantly say Mea Culpa is not just a podcast, it's a movement. And that's why I ask people to just stay connected, because we're constantly putting out new information and things that we need help on. So, if we don't ensure that we get the votes out there in November for this midterm, and especially for the general, we're going to be, as a country, we're watching our democracy, in a free fall, in what's known on Wall Street as a death spiral. But Mike, let me thank you so much for your time. It's great seeing you, my friend.
Absolutely.
Always great seeing you and sharing another hour. So you stay safe.
I will.
And stay in touch, because I need you back on the program.
I look forward to coming back, and congrats in the effort.
Congrats on your new podcast, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, man. We have
the Michael Steele podcast.
We have a lot of fun, my friends. Check it out, and it's great. It's great when we get a conversation going, Michael. Really appreciate you, man.
You got it, pal, and I appreciate you. So thank you.